All right. Welcome everyone to the Pham's Coffee Hour. I don't know how I feel about that name yet. I kind of like it. I think these podcasts might last about an hour or so. I think we're just going to stick with that. This is a podcast interviewing the people behind our local businesses in the Tri-Cities of Nebraska. Today we have a very special guest, Danielle Helzer. Thank you so much for coming on the show. So Danielle's here to speak about her new adventure, starting a bookstore, Rooted Books and Gift. It is located in downtown Grand Island, if you did not know. But before we get into that, I'd like to highlight a few things that I found out about Danielle. So she started her career as an educator, teaching high school English. During her teaching career, she was named the Outstanding Young Educator of the Year by the Nebraska Language Arts Council and Susan McDaniel's Teacher of the Year Award from the Nebraska Writing Project. And most recently, the WYCA of Grand Island named her as the 2023 Women of Distinction Award. She was nominated by 11 community members. She just replied that basically none of the work she does is she does to earn awards. It's really because she believes in the purpose. It's clear to me that you're on a life mission to create positive change in the education space, to advocate for women, people of color, people in the LGBTQ community. Is there like a very specific moment in your life that caused you to change the outlook of how you see life and kind of start you on this path of positivity?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I don't think I can pinpoint like a specific moment, but ever since I was really young, I've been moved by stories. And that's really what compels me to do anything is like when I hear people's stories. If it's a story of struggle or a story of resilience or a story of, curiosity, I'm usually moved, by that. So, I mean, I do remember I was such a nerd when I was a little kid and remember reading about the Bosnian War and like being horrified by it because it was happening when I was, a young child.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like falling down this huge rabbit hole, right? And wanting to read about like ethnic cleansing, that was happening in Bosnia and, read Zlata's diary, which is like the diary of Anne Frank, but, for the Bosnian War. And thinking like, why aren't we doing something about what's happening in Bosnia? And my parents are like, what?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's just how I've been,
Uh-huh.
I think especially, when I would grow up and I would meet people who were different than me or struggled with certain things, like I would just be really compelled by like their stories or their struggles. And that
Mm-hmm.
would usually cause me to like see the injustice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then once you see an injustice, it's hard not to take action on
Mm-hmm.
that. It's hard for me anyway to not
Mm-hmm.
take action on it. So that's I think it's just it all comes back to stories, and my parents put books in my hands at a very early age, and so I think that helped.
Man, so you're just the curiosity of these things have
Mhm.
caused you to look into it.
Mhm.
I think we see stuff all the time on the news,
Mhm.
TikToks, this and that, and we're just like, oh, well, that's happening. But I
Mhm.
guess a lot of us don't think about it's like it's a different world out there
Yeah.
for other people. I suppose if it doesn't affect you personally, maybe you don't care as much. So
Mhm.
that's great that you're able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, just being an empath, kind of drives that. But I always want to understand why,
Hmm.
like for everything, right?
Hmm.
I'm sure it drove like my teachers crazy,
Hmm.
and my parents crazy and any other sort of authority figure crazy because I'm always asking why.
Hmm.
And so if I hear a story, right? And oftentimes like, when you hear a story about like an injustice, like it doesn't make sense, right? You're like, why?
Hmm.
And yeah, so just looking into that usually leads me to like spiral down to this rabbit hole, and uncover why, or to talk to people who have been impacted by that particular thing, or to seek out voices
Hmm.
that have been like when I was learning about Bosnia, reading, accounts from young Bosnians, was really important to me as a kid then. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. It pairs really nicely with owning a bookstore, to be perfectly honest. So yeah.
Yeah, why do you say that is?
Well, I think it's because, bookstores are endless places of curiosity, right? I mean, there's literally a book for everything, for every interest, for every question under the sun. Like you can find a book for that, which is pretty incredible. Like you're just not going to run out of books. And I think, because of my curiosity, because of my love for learning, because of my passion for stories, I mean, it like owning a bookstore just feels right. It feels like the natural fit.
Sure. Why do you think the medium of like books specifically is kind of impactful in compared to like a video or like a podcast or like like why do you think is books specifically?
Well, and I think for me, I think every medium is important, right? I mean, I think podcast, has an important role, video has an important role, song has an important role, but books, like the actual physical book, rather than like a book that you read on your phone,
Sure,
or even an audiobook, a book requires you to slow down a little bit, right? And it requires a kind of undivided attention. You can't really read a book if you're talking to someone else. You just can't, right? I mean, you could eat while you read a book, right? You can't really drive when you read a book, though I did have a customer that told me he did that and got pulled over. I was like, yeah, it's not very safe.
I did not endorse that.
Right. But it causes you to slow down. And I think that's something that as I get older, in my 20s and even early in my 30s, like it was all about hustle culture and like trying to, do all the things and get all the things done and work as hard as I could and work as many hours. But the older I get, the more I realize that there's value in the slowing down and in the detail. And a book can do that, right? It kind of, I always feel like, when you walk into a bookstore, time kind of slows down just a little bit, right? And when you open a book, time, like the concept of time just kind of goes away, right? It's why we, oftentimes readers will say, yeah, I stayed up until like 4 o'clock in the morning, to finish the book. And I had no idea, right? I had no idea that I'd been up so long, right? Because we just lose sense of time because we get so enraptured in people's stories.
Oh man, that's amazing. Yeah. I never thought about it like that, but yeah.
And then when you're reading on your device, right? There's the inclination to like
just swipe.
Keep swiping or keep going to like toggle to a different app, whereas a book you can't do anything else other than turn the pages,
Sure.
So yeah.
Do you find yourself reading more or less now that you're a little bit older?
Yeah, I think when I was a kid, I read all the time. I would skip classes in high school to read books. I'd be like, this class is pointless. I'm going to the park to read. And, through college, and I was an English teacher. So, obviously I was reading books while I was teaching. But as an adult, I think I don't know that I've read more, but I think my reading palette has expanded. And I think as a bookstore owner, I'm definitely reading less, just because I have to read so much about books, right, in order to be able to like curate the inventory and figure out what's coming out and what people are going to like. But I try to devote at least 1 hour a day to reading.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I have a confession. I don't read much.
That's okay.
At all.
That's okay. I can help you with that.
Alyssa's definitely the avid reader between the two of us, but even now, it probably just excuses, but we're like, we just don't have time to read.
Yeah.
But I'm not gonna lie, I've seen people read before, like just sitting at the park or something. And I was just like, why don't I do that? But it's just but I love the way you put it. Yeah, it's a chance for you to slow down and be able to get lost in those stories. And what a wonderful thing those are, because if they don't have those stories, they get lost and no one ever knows about them.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
I have another question for you here. So in my research, I found out that as you mentioned, you've been an educator for many years, 8.5 years, and you actually also ran for the Nebraska State Board of Education. Can you tell us some positive memories that you've had during the time that you were an educator, and maybe some takeaways that you've been able to gather in that time?
Yeah. I loved being a teacher. I think about going back all the time to the classroom. And the only reason why I don't go back is because it's not a flexible schedule. And I found that when I left teaching and went into a flexible schedule job, right, I was like, wow, this is really incredible. I mean, I can pee whenever I want to pee, you know? I have to like get someone to cover for me.
Yeah.
So that's pretty great. But I miss the classroom. And one of the things that I love like most about it was just the relationships that you got to develop with students. I taught high school, and I was a coach, coached cross country, and helped with musicals and plays and those kinds of things. And like the students that I taught 10 years ago, many of them are my friends now. And we've had several that have come to the bookstore in Grand Island since it's opened. I had a student that is living in Spain right now, and she's teaching there. And she was back home and just showed up at the bookstore. I'm like, what are you doing? I haven't seen you in like a year because you live in Spain, Another one from Wyoming. He had both my husband and I as a teacher and came back and just surprised us one day, So looking back on those relationships has been really, really powerful. We have students that text us on Mother's Day and on Father's Day, and often tell us that we were like a second parent to them. So that's just really cool, right? When you get to show up for kids in that way is just really powerful. And I think, the biggest takeaway, for my time teaching and my time running for State Board of Education, to be honest, is that that kids are way more capable than we give them credit for. Like, I don't think as adults, like we have a really good understanding, unless you spend a lot of time with kids, right? I don't think you have a really good understanding of what it is that our young people are capable of. I had students in the classroom that had experienced tremendous trauma, right? Tremendous, like a life full of trauma. And they were showing up to school every day and getting good grades and doing their work and having a job. Like, that's tremendous, or like when you would set a high expectation for students, coupled that with like, positive relationships with them, they will literally rise to any expectation you give them, right? So you give them a high expectation and you have a positive relationship with them, they're going to meet that expectation 100% of the time.
Wow.
And I just think we don't give kids credit for that. I mean, kids are really resilient. They're smart. They're so much smarter than what we think they are. And they have a drive and a desire, right? To do good, to be noticed, to be seen, right? To be in relationship. And I just think they're really cool humans. So yeah.
God, that speaks a lot to about what kind of teacher you were. If you're having this kind of relationship with your students many, many, many years on. And I bet that is a wonderful thing that you can share with them. Yeah. I know it's not much of a comparison, but even in the small amount of time that Liz and I have been in business, and a lot of our customers are kids because they love the boba, but we're just seeing them grow up, and man, it is so such a beautiful thing. Like, it's only been a year and a half, but I'll see seniors graduate, and they'll come back and they're in college, and they're just completely different people, and they're just like, it's wonderful to be a part of that experience. And Alyssa and I are expecting next year, and we're getting so many.
Exciting.
Thank you so much. We're getting so many like videos about like, how do you raise your kids, and what do you do, and this and that, and the only thing I can gather is like, I completely understand what you mean when you say like, these kids are very smart and they're very capable, and they're listening. They're listening, and they're watching you and your actions and what you say, and how, if you believe in them or not. And just that little bit of positive belief, man, that they can do it, man, that instills a lot of positivity in themselves to be able to carry on. And for everybody that's not a teacher, I just want to thank you for doing that job, because you're instilling confidence and belief and skills in people that grow up to touch other people's lives. And it's an endless cycle that started with what you did. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. So let's jump into Rooted.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions for you, at least. So Danielle actually won the big idea Grand Island pitch, and I think she won $5,000
Hmm.
in like resources.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Hmm.
I'm glad you won that. So congratulations for
Thank
actually
you.
opening your business this
Yeah,
year. It's crazy, like running the business is difficult, but
yeah.
getting it
Oh my
started,
gosh, so hard.
like
So
I
hard.
didn't realize I had to be an accountant and
Oh my gosh.
um,
Marketing
painting.
and
Yeah,
construction and
I'm glad you have a great partner that's
yeah.
supportive and
Yes, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so can you tell us a little bit about Rooted and your mission
Yeah.
behind it, and maybe just kind of the idea, like how did it come about? Is it something you've thought about for a while,
Hmm.
or like
Yeah, sure. So, um, we decided to open a bookstore, my partner and I, my husband and I, in October of 2023. Really kind of started talking about it in like August, and then in October, like, yeah, we're definitely doing this.
mhm,
It doesn't sound like a lot of time. We had thought about it, for a long time before, but the sort of like driving impetus for it was my husband was like on a work conference
mhm,
in Chicago like earlier that summer in July. And he was traveling. He was with our son, and he had cardiac arrest. So he's only 40 years old, and
mhm,
his heart stops, and he
mhm,
collapses, in Chicago, and was unconscious for like 10 minutes, right, until
mhm,
they could, start CPR and get him in the ambulance and everything. So it was a huge deal. I mean, we were in the hospital for a good month in Chicago, away from our home, away from family, kids, that kind of thing. And it's one of those moments in your life, right, where you're like, oh, am I doing what I want to be doing? Right. Like, um, you realize like how short life is, when you have those near death experiences. And we just really started talking about like how we have done so much in our lives and we've loved the things that we've done.
mhm,
And the one thing that we've always talked about doing since we moved to Grand Island 9 years ago is creating a space, for people. Like we kicked around the idea of a community center, right? Like let's open up a community center or indoor skate park for kids, right?
mhm.
I still think that's a great idea. If someone out there wants to do it and fund it, I'll help you. Um,
I'm pretty sure Goodwill's moving. I think
yeah,
maybe
there's a
someday could do an
huge
indoor
space.
game.
That'd be a great place.
Yeah.
Listen, right by a school. Come on now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we'd always wanted to create a space for people that didn't revolve around food, didn't revolve around alcohol, um, like a space where people could come and they could learn and they could gather and they could grow together and they could just exist.
Mhm,
And we talked about like what the space could look like in different iterations. And it wasn't until like Nate almost died that I was like, oh, a bookstore, obviously. Like
mhm,
I have loved bookstores ever since I was a kid, and I would spend my Friday nights in a bookstore looking at books, or I would drive to Lincoln and Omaha because
mhm,
we had a bookstore in my hometown for like a short amount of time, then it closed down. And I was like, a bookstore can do all of those things. Since we started researching like bookstores and like the role that they serve in their communities and bookstores, there's been this resurgence of independent bookstores popping up around the country since the pandemic. And it's really because bookstores are this third space, right?
mhm,
That the community can go, and it can be a place, like I said, for events, a place to shop, but it can also be like a place for community gatherings. It can
mhm,
be a place for community organizing to occur and to happen. Um, so yeah, we just, after that sort of near death experience, we're like, yeah, let's do it. Why not a bookstore? We haven't
mhm,
had one in Grand Island since 2015 when Hastings Books and Music closed.
mhm,
And then before that, it was Walden Books. But I don't know of an indie bookstore that's been in Grand Island. I heard
mhm.
of one like maybe in the 70s that might have been downtown. But that was the last I'd heard about an independent bookstore. And I was like, shoot, we can do this, right? Like, how hard could it be? It was very hard. It was very difficult. So yeah, we chose Rooted Books and Gifts. We chose the name Rooted because we wanted a space where we could feel rooted in Grand Island. Um, I've always sort of, even though we've lived here for 9 years, just because of the beliefs that I carry, and the values that I hold, kind of puts me on the outskirts a little bit of mainstream Grand Island.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really clear, that became really clear when I ran for State Board of Education. And, I'm just a volunteer stepping up to run for this local office. And then all of a sudden, there's nasty postcards floating around about my family, or about my teaching, and all of these claims of indoctrinating kids by giving them books. Gasp,
I did not know you experienced these
Oh
things.
yeah, so much. Lots of money spent, to send out like smear attacks. And so it just became really clear, like either we needed to leave this community because we quite honestly didn't feel safe here. Like our kids were like, we got to get security cameras on the house, because I mean, people were wild at this particular point in time and about this office. And the temperature really hasn't cooled down all that much, in terms of education races. And so it was either we need to leave or we need to create a space where we can feel rooted and where others who experience something similar can also feel rooted. And we chose to stay because of all the people we had and all the relationships we had built and the people we met. And this community deserves a space like that. So we chose to stay, we chose to be rooted, we chose to plant roots here. And that's kind of where that imagery came from.
Well, I'm glad you guys stayed. Yeah, it's really kind of ridiculous. I mean, I think we've been floating around about 50,000 population wise for probably a good while.
Yeah.
And there's no reason why we should not have a good bookstore here in town.
Yeah. I was like, man, we need it so badly.
Shout out to Hastings Bookstore. I worked there when I grew up. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to go there all the time.
Dude, I used to work in the music section, and you can choose the music for the whole store. If you're working that section,
no
yeah.
way.
So I was rocking out to like Chevelle and like,
I loved like the headphone section where you could like put the CD under the scanner, and like it would play the music, and you could experience the CD before you bought it.
Yeah,
loved that.
Yeah, what a cool place. Ironically, I have faint memories of it, but I made drinks when I worked at Hastings Bookstore, and I really liked it. And it's really ironic because now I'm now I'm a barista again, so it's gone full circle.
That's cool.
Speaking of creating a space for others, I've noticed that you've actually hosted many events at the store. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those events and why you're hosting them?
Sure. Yeah, we've had a lot of events. Now, I mean, we're kind of just a 1-person, 2-person shop. So I kind of like that. I'm like, ooh, this sounds cool. Let's do it on Friday,
Yeah. Pop-up style.
Yes, exactly. So we've had, we do story time second Saturday of every month. And that's for like our tiny humans, they can come. And really, I wanted to do that to put stories in kids' lives, but also to help young parents build relationships with other young parents, because that's really difficult. I remember being in that stage with our kids when they were young, and it's hard to find like good relationships with other parents because you're just like so in the weeds with keeping your kids alive, and you're like, I need some solidarity here.
Yeah.
And so the hope is like we started to see kind of the same people come to the story time on the second Saturday, which is cool, right? Because then you can build relationships with people. So we do that. We have book clubs. We have a silent book club the third Thursday of every month where people literally just come and they sit and they read their own book for 45 minutes. We don't talk. It's just a sacred space for reading. It's phenomenal. And we've had a couple poets out. We had a slam poet, 2 slam poets from the Lincoln area come out and do a poetry performance. The Gish poetry team led an open mic night a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
And they ran it as like a slam poetry open mic night. It was so cool. We're going to do those again. I think we're going to do those quarterly with the Gish team.
Oh man, I bet they loved it.
They loved it, and they did such an amazing job. And we had people show up that weren't part of the Gish team to read poetry too, that they had written. So that's really cool. We've had a local children's book author come out and do a book signing. So so we really, we just wanted to be creative, right, about the things that we're doing. We're in January, we have a vision board workshop that's being led by a woman in the community that I know. We're having a launch party for a book that's being released. That's like, there's a lot of hype about this book. And so we're doing like, a lot of people do midnight release parties, but I am too old for that ish. I do not want to go out in January at midnight to my bookstore and open it up. So we're doing like a 7 a.m. Donuts and silent reading. Like, get your book, so we wanted to give people something to do, right? That's not like, we're not bar people, my husband and I, and it just feels like that's the only thing to do in the evening, right? Like, what do? You go out to eat, maybe you go to a movie, maybe. I mean, our movie theater's been closed for a long time, so if you're lucky, you might get to go to the Grand, if there's no seats, but otherwise, there's not a whole lot to do. So we wanted to provide something that revolved around stories and culture and growth and learning and give people opportunities to build community.
Dude, you need a bigger space, man.
I know.
We gotta figure out how to.
I know. We only have 800 square feet, and story time is like cramped. And so I'm trying to desperately figure out, like, how do we like maneuver things in the store, temporarily for story time to make it work a little bit more. I don't know. We'll see.
There's something really fun too about everybody being in a small space.
Yeah, it forces that proximity, right? You end up, being elbow to elbow with someone that you might not have been elbow to elbow with before. And that's a different kind of proximity.
I love that you're embracing the small business, like agile business style, because that's something that corporate can't do.
Yeah, exactly.
They can't just come up with a great idea and then like, let's just do it this weekend pop-up style, and you just have people that show up. That's so fun. So I'm glad you're doing that.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the community and how you've just been open for maybe 3 months now?
Yeah.
And you've just had an enormous amount of support from the community.
Yeah.
How does that feel?
Oh,
is it surreal?
It is really surreal. Like, I'm kind of a cynic by nature. So I'm like, oh yeah, we'll do this bookstore. It'll probably close. Like, like it'll probably fail, but it's been really amazing. I mean, we've been like nonstop busy the holiday season for sure, but really busy ever since we opened. And then just the support that's yes, it's, supporting us to come buy a book from us, right? Or to come buy a gift. But we have people who come and drop off money so that we can give books to kids.
Wow.
Right? Because they want kids to have their own books. So that prompted us to do like a fundraiser, for kids that are in shelter at Hope Harbor this holiday season. And rather than just, buying books for kids and then giving them the books, right? We decided we'd raise money and then bring the kids to the store and let them pick out their own books.
Oh, interesting.
So we've got, each kid is getting about $50 to buy their own books this holiday season, which is so cool. And the community just really rallied and showed up. So we were able to raise about $2,000, in like no time, really, it was really cool. And then, when I launched, we have a high school band book club, that I was like, let's do this, and we're going to do it in January. And my daughter and I were like planning it and whatnot. And she picked the first book. And so when I announced that, I had people who were like, hey, can I give you the money so that if someone can't afford it, they can have their book paid for, and I was like, what? Like, these are really amazing people showing up in our community. And they're people that I've never met before. Like, being in the nonprofit sector, and having to fundraise, or running for, office and having to fundraise, like I've met a lot of people in this community, but I'm still meeting more that are so generous and that are so wonderful, and that are so excited about having a bookstore in town, and it really blew my mind. I was like, maybe it won't close, like this.
Like we might make it.
I mean, I know the statistics about new businesses, and how they shutter, how many shutter their doors within the first 3 years. Like, I know that's a reality. But even though I'm a cynic, I think I have a bigger belief in the power of humanity, right? To show up. And I think a lot of people are realizing right now, because downtown Grand Island now is very different than what downtown Grand Island looked like 10 years ago, right? And I think people realize that, like, they don't want their downtown to look like what it did 15 years ago. They're realizing, like, the downfalls of, like, major corporations, right? Even a Barnes and Noble, while it's cool to walk into a Barnes and Noble, a Barnes and Noble is going to look the same in Oregon as it does in Nebraska. You walk into an indie bookstore in Grand Island and an indie bookstore in Lincoln, they're totally different. The selection is totally different. You might find some of the same books, but overall it's going to be totally different because it's the style of the owner and the curators and the book buyers. So I think people realize that, right? And they want these small mom and pop shops, right? Like these local businesses like ours to keep going. So it's really restored my faith in humanity, and it keeps reminding me to not be a cynic.
Well, that's such a beautiful thing. On that same note, I think it should be said that people need a reason to I shouldn't say they need a reason, but it definitely helps that you're curating something in Grand Island that gives people the ability to contribute in different ways financially with their times and things like that. So that's amazing that you've been able to do that and just give people space and time and reason. And they couldn't support otherwise if you weren't there. So you're gonna stay in business, but you're staying in business because you guys are rocking it.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, and I couldn't do it. Like, I'm there during the day. But like, my husband is super supportive. I mean, and like, he forced me a couple weeks ago. He's like, you got to take a day off, right? Like, I'll run the store on Sunday. Like, you got to stay home. And so, wouldn't be able to do that, like, if we didn't have this, like, supportive team together. And then I also have a young person who's in high school who comes and works at the shop, and it's a partnership with vocational rehab, which is really cool because, like, they're working with students that wouldn't normally get a job opportunity, get, like, experience so that they can apply for, their own job, and then vocational rehab pays for the salary, they pay for the insurance, they pay for that all. And it's been really awesome. Like, the kid who comes to the shop to help us out, he's like a manga expert. And I know nothing about manga. I didn't even know how to say it. I was like, manga. He was like, oh my God, please stop. So he, he's curated, like, his own shelf, of manga at the store.
Oh man.
Like, he's looking through catalogs of, like, books that are going to be recently released. And he's like, okay, I think this book would do well because of XYZ. And so, I just love that we get to do that too. Like, as a small business, we can't afford to hire someone right now, but I love that there's partnerships out there, like with vocational rehab, right? Who can help these small businesses and help young people or other people in our community, who need job experience. I just think it's really cool. And I think it's something, like, more small businesses should take advantage of, and because it's a cool opportunity. It's like this dual beneficiary, thing. I feel like I'm getting just as much out of it as what, the young person is working at our store. So
I guess that works out well that it just happened that they are working at your store because they're into that. So they wouldn't probably have that opportunity elsewhere. Exactly.
And I think that's the beauty of what they do, right? Is they get these, individuals that come in and they figure out what their interests are and what their strengths are, and then seek out, a place that's going to be a good fit for them. And so, this woman called me and she's like, hey, we've never met, but I know you're opening a bookstore. I got a kid who loves manga, and I was like, that sounds great.
Why do you feel like it's, why, the people are listening now, let's give them not give them a reason, but let's talk about why shopping local is so important to our community. What are some, like, what are some benefits that you see that are that would help?
Well, I mean, first of all, think about, we've only been open for 3 months and we've generated $2,000 for a nonprofit. I don't see Amazon doing that. Like, hashtag Amazon would never, Like, we don't see them just giving money to organizations in our community that are doing good work. They're not doing it. So I think number one, right, like local businesses, research shows that they give more to their communities. They generate and circulate more money that stays within the local economy on a far greater rate than what corporations do. And yeah, it's more expensive, right? I mean, I had a woman call me and she was like, well, I could get the book for $2 cheaper on Amazon. I'm like, you're right, you could. And we're doing things in the community that Amazon is not doing. We're having book clubs. We're giving kids a safe space to hang out on a Friday night.
That's worth $2.
Yeah, that's worth $2, right? I mean, like without these local businesses, what does our community look like? I mean, it looks the same as every other community in the country. Strip malls.
Just a bunch of Dollar Trees.
Yeah, a bunch of Dollar Trees everywhere. That's like my nightmare. Like that must be what hell looks like, is just like Dollar Trees, And so I just think there's so much benefit, right? I mean, honestly, we treat our employees so much better, than big, large corporations, because we know our employees. There's so fewer of us, and we know their families and we know their stories. And so we're going to treat our people better, than Amazon does. Amazon doesn't treat their people well, There's lots of documented instances of labor violations and human rights violations and things like that. So, I mean, we keep money in the community, we create jobs, we treat people well, we recirculate more money into the community. We support the community, and we show up for the community. We're the ones on the front lines, right? Like during the pandemic, and I think about all these small businesses. We tried to go support a new small business every Friday night with our dollars, because we wanted them to stay open. And they were the ones staying open, whereas like other places were shuttering their doors. It was the local mom and pop shops that stayed open because they had to, right? It's their livelihood. So we just have a lot more skin in the game, and, strong communities rely on a strong local business sector. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, God, I feel like that should have been just a mic drop there, Yeah, it's like as a consumer, it's going to take a little bit more effort on your end. We don't have, large drive-throughs that you can conveniently, but you could come in and get somebody to greet you with a smile and face, and it might actually be something you appreciate. And just the general customer service and the support that you get when you come into these local places is because like it's weird. People like their jobs, so they're going to treat customers well or whatnot, So, yes, please consider shopping local and supporting your local business owners, because I mean, none of us are driving around in like Cadillacs or nothing like that. We're not getting rich off for this, We're just trying to do something that we love and creating change and just helping the community. For us here at Phams, we just started about 1.5 years ago, and our team, after we opened the second location, our team just grew from 4 to 8, and it's been so awesome meeting all of these new people and hiring. And to your point about we didn't really have any part-timers before, but the recent part-timers that we've hired that are just like teenagers that are like sophomore, juniors, they're blowing my mind.
Yeah.
They're so quick to pick up on stuff.
Yeah, man.
They're a little shy with customers, but you can tell that every single day they work, they're just getting better. And they're better baristas than I am. They're showing me tricks. Like they're making 2 drinks at the same time. And I'm like, I didn't even think about that. We're making TikToks together. And I'm like, I didn't even know I could do a TikTok. It's like so fun, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. We always underestimate young people and teenagers in particular. But they're amazing.
They are amazing.
Amazing and weird little like humans. We love them.
I think we're gonna kind of round out the podcast here. any future plans for Rooted that you want to spill the beans on?
Sure. Yeah, we've got I mentioned, some book clubs coming up. We have a band book club that we're starting just for high school students.
Mhm.
And students can register every month. So it's
Sure.
not like something that you commit to in perpetuity.
Uh-huh.
So January, we're reading The Hate You Give, and then the group that is in the book club in January, once we talk about the book, they'll pick the next book, and then we'll open registration up for that.
Okay.
Yeah, and so then, we'll open that registration up. Students will be able to get the book, read the book, and then come chat, with other high school students about what they think about the book. We also, in February, we're going to launch a new book club that's all going to be centered around the idea of rest. So there's this book out there that I love. It's called Rest is Resistance. And a friend of mine who's a licensed mental health professional is going to be facilitating the book club. And they are really great at talking about rest. And so that's going to be a really important one, I think, for people in our community. And then it's living in my head right now. It's not anywhere on paper, but I want to do a creative writing camp for middle school kids in the summer at the bookshop.
Okay.
Yes, to teach kids kind of like the ins and the outs and have, different genres of writing, but then have someone come in and talk about publishing. Like, what does it mean to publish a book?
Sure.
And how do you do that?
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So just kind of keep that as a plug. If anybody wants to help me, feel free to call.
What do you think our listeners can do to help you and support Rooted? What is some simple things that they can do?
I mean, I think even just coming to the shop, right, and telling people about us.
Mhm.
Like, you don't have to buy something every time you come in.
Mhm.
We've got a community puzzle in the back, so you can just sit and do the puzzle if you want. Leaving positive reviews on Google is huge. Liking our social media posts and sharing those out. Those are all like no cost ways you can support our business and any other business, to be honest. And then, the next step would be like buying something, even if it's a pin, right? We have these really cute little pins for like $2. Buying a pin is super important. Like every dollar matters to a small business owner.
Dude, everybody around here has been freaking out about these the cat pens that we've seen circulating around, and they're just like, where do you get them?
Where do you get these cat pins? We have some that are capybaras with the squishy butts on them, like those. Yeah. So
that's so funny.
Yeah, and we keep our inventory fresh and new, and so the cat pins are here now, but they won't be here in 2 months or 3 months. We'll have something new, so it's always motive, for people to come back and just kind of see what we have in the store.
Sure.
Yeah.
Man, thank you so much for coming by. Just doing a little bit of research about you. I've that much more respect about the life you're living and what you're doing, and we'll try our best to support you, continue supporting as much as possible.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for doing the show.
Yeah,
awesome.
You're welcome. We'll see everybody another day. Thank you.